All right, friends, we are going to go ahead and get started. We are officially recording and let's do this. Welcome again to this week's Texas Counts Town Hall. We are going to be talking all things getting out the vote and count today. Just a quick rundown of today's agenda. Of course, starting off with a welcome. Again, thanks for tuning in. Then we'll go right into a 2020 census update. And then I want to spend some time talking about voting in Texas. I've pulled a lot of information that I'm not necessarily going to cover all of the details, but I did just want to provide that information to you. So when you are engaging folks in voter engagement, that you kind of know what's going on in the state of Texas. Then we'll talk about how you can combine your GOTC and GOT efforts, and then we'll save some time at the end for our Q&A. As a reminder, we're in a Zoom meeting, so feel free to speak up if you do have any questions, but also know that your mics are live. So if you do want to mute yourself, that would be amazing. And then know that, of course, our chat box is available and open. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to pop them in there as well at any time. We're recording today's conversation, so we'll share that out with you, and we'll also make sure you get the slide deck as well. But let's go ahead and get started. So I could not talk about the 2020 census in Texas without looking at our self-response map. Currently, in terms of self-response, Texas is sitting at 61.7% as of yesterday. So we've got the latest data. The newest stuff is going to be coming out this afternoon. With that, I did want to share that in addition to self-response, 33.4% is the share of units that have been resolved via non-response follow-up. And as a reminder, that's when the Census Bureau is going into communities, going door to door, and doing that interview in person to get folks to respond to the 2020 census. So when we look at combining the self-response rate with our non-response follow-up work the Bureau has been doing, 95.2% is the total share of housing units that have been enumerated in Texas as of yesterday. So again, we're not quite at 100% yet. We have a little over a week left currently with the 2020 census. And one thing that I did just want to remind folks when we're thinking about the census and encouraging folks to respond is that we still really, really want to continue pushing self-response. And again, that means when a household is responding online, by phone, or by mail. And the reason why we're pushing this is that's the way that we are going to get the most accurate data on the 2020 census. With non-response follow-up, without going too much into the nitty-gritty, sometimes Census Bureau enumerators are not necessarily getting that information from a household. They might be getting it from a proxy, meaning a neighbor or a landlord might be sharing information about a household. And again, we want to make sure we're getting the most accurate data possible. So let's make sure that we're still reminding our communities to self-respond to the 2020 census. In addition to that, I shared these last time, but I do want to put the dates before you one more time in terms of what some of these Census Bureau enumeration operations are looking like. Service-based enumeration is starting tomorrow. This is when the Bureau is going to soup kitchen shelters, regular scheduled food vans to count folks that are being served. They're also going to be doing the count of folks experiencing homelessness this week as well. And they've also been doing the enumeration of transitory locations. Just an FYI, the Census Bureau doesn't really broadly broadcast these enumerations that they're doing. Again, they want to protect kind of the safety and privacy of the folks that they're enumerating through this process. So you're probably not going to see any big kind of news blast coming from the Bureau about these counting efforts. But I did want to let you know that they are currently taking place or about to start happening. In addition, in terms of if folks are still mailing in their questionnaires, they need to be received by October 7th. So as a reminder, if our communities are going to be self-responding, we want to make sure that they're counted. And so the earlier the better is kind of the rule of thumb in terms of mailing in your questionnaires. If you are curious about where the Census Bureau stands in terms of operational updates, I've linked the website and presentation that they shared not too long ago down there. In terms of where we're sitting at with our court proceedings, do know that this is continuing to be a developing story. So as a reminder, on September 5th, a federal court ordered the Bureau to stop shutting down critical door knocking and in-person counting efforts for the 2020 census until a September 17th hearing takes place. Just to let you know, that hearing did not take place last week. It's actually going to be taking place tomorrow, which is September 22nd. And so with that, again, we don't have a resolution to what's going on with this particular order. So do know that this is taking place tomorrow. We'll continue to keep you updated on the latest information. We'll probably have something in and about our newsletter going out this week. But a big thing kind of coming from that as well is that the census operations cannot start winding down until September 24th at the latest. And so originally we were talking about September 17th. We've pushed the timeline a little bit further in terms of when the Census Bureau or we've pushed the kind of the stopping point for the Bureau when they can start winding down their efforts, which is good. We want them to continue enumerating our households and supporting this count. If you are curious and digging in a little bit more, the full order is right here. It's linked. There's also statements from the Bureau, just a couple of different articles specifically about this court case. But if you want the best information, I highly encourage you to follow Hansi Lo Wang, an NPR reporter. His Twitter page is always very live and very active with the latest information regarding the census. So if you are wanting to get the latest news on how this federal court order is proceeding, I highly encourage you to tune into his Twitter page tomorrow. And last but not least, this is a little bit older news, but still want to celebrate this big win. If you recall, the president put out a memo, the administration put out a memo where they wanted to remove undocumented immigrants from the apportionment count. Thankfully, this has been blocked. This is a huge win for us because we know, again, everyone counts on the 2020 census, and we don't want our communities to feel any fear in terms of responding. And so thankfully, a three-judge court blocked this. The ruling was marked on the grounds that the memo violated Congress's authority to conduct the census and the apportionment calculation. So if you do want more information on that, there's an NPR article there. Jordan is asking, so the hearing could result in the census efforts continuing through October 31st. A very great question, and this is a question on a lot of our minds in terms of what's going to happen with that legal battle happening right now. This is not a great answer, but the answer right now is we don't know. We at Texas Counts are going to continue operating. That September 30th is the last day that our households can respond. And so we are really continuing to push this count to make sure that our communities are counted. But technically, depending on kind of how these legal proceedings are going, the deadline could potentially move past September 30th. But again, we're not going to bank on that. We just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty out there right now. So my suggestion to everyone on the call is let's operate that next Wednesday, September 30th is still the deadline for the 2020 census questionnaire. But let's also make sure that we're watching these court proceedings very carefully. In addition to that, there's legislation at the federal level being pushed to extend the timeline as well. So there's a lot of kind of factors that could potentially come into play. And again, we just all have to make sure we're tuning in. And of course, Texas Counts will keep you posted. But long story short, let's keep thinking of September 30th as our deadline for the 2020 census. And if not, we'll keep you posted in terms of what next steps might look like for that. And then, of course, I cannot talk about census updates without resharing these great little images just in terms of what non-response looks like and how community members can identify census workers. And then, of course, we know that the 2020 census is safe, quick, and easy. And so these are just really easy images that folks can use to promote the 2020 census with their communities. And yes, Carlos, we will definitely have access to this presentation. Now, I'm going to pause there to see if we have any other questions in terms of census updates, but if not, we're going to go ahead and switch to talking about getting out the vote. Cool, let's do it. You might be wondering, Katie, you talk about the census all the time. Why are we talking about voting right now? And I want to bring us back to kind of a conversation we had at a town hall a few weeks ago about the importance of being seen, being heard, and being counted. And another way we can look at this, of course, is one, being counted on the 2020 census. Two, being registered to vote, and then three, actually being a voter and participating in the 2020 election. Of course, we know that not everyone who participates in the census gets the opportunity to participate and be a voter in the 2020 election. But this is again about our representation in our communities, making sure that our voices are heard, making sure that when we are getting those federal dollars back to our communities, that we are putting folks in places of power as elected officials, and they're making smart decisions about what's getting funded in our communities. And so when we think again about how we can tie in voting and counting, they're both part of our civic duty as folks in the United States. Again, I know that not everyone that can be counted can be voted, but they probably have a loved one or a family member or a friend that can participate and vote in the 2020 election. And so that's why, again, at Texas Counts, we think it's so important to make sure that our community members are informed as well as our census advocates too. So let's do a somewhat of a deep dive into what voting is going to look like in Texas this year. Just to let folks know, most of the information that I'm pulling today is coming directly from the Texas Tribune. They have an extremely robust voter education guide in terms of what voting is going to look like in Texas. And so if you are able to engage in this work, I highly encourage you to share this out with folks in your networks, just because it is an amazing resource. But with that, the big things we're going to talk about today is, of course, when we have to register to vote by, which is October 5th, we have 14 days left. When's the deadline to request a mail-in ballot? When does early voting start? And then, of course, election day as well. So in terms of registration, this is what's really big that's happening right now. I'm sure that you have hopefully seen things on social media. You've seen folks safely in communities getting folks registered to vote. And so the first thing that I would always encourage folks that are engaging in voter registration work, our GOTV efforts, is checking to see if someone is registered to vote. And there are two quick ways, or a couple of quick ways to do this on the Texas's Secretary of State's website. There's some information to verify if you are registered to vote for the 2020 election. You can click right here to see if you're registered as well. I'm in the process of moving, and so this past weekend I had to update my voter registration with my new address. And so for folks that are in similar situations that I'm in, who might have moved since the last election, make sure that your address is up to date, make sure all your information is up to date, and you can easily check that by going to the website. In addition, I also linked just more information about who specifically can vote in the state of Texas. If you are needing to register or wanting to register folks to vote, the application deadline is they have to be postmarked by October 5th. That is the deadline. There are a couple of ways to register folks to vote. First is you can request an application right here. So you can actually go to the Secretary of State's website, type in your information, and they'll mail you a voter registration form and application that you can fill out, and it should have the pre-postage stuff so you can just send it right back in. You can also download, print, and mail your application in. This is traditionally what I've done in the past. It's really easy just to download the form, fill it out. If you have access to a printer, you can print it and then mail in the app. So both of these are really quick and easy ways to register to vote in Texas. Unfortunately, you cannot register to vote online in the state of Texas. Again, big difference from the 2020 census in terms of messaging. It's got to be that physical paper copy going back to your registrar's office. And in terms of voting by mail, I apologize if I butcher this, but I did want to explain what voting by mail looks like in Texas, especially under the lens of COVID-19. So the short answer, can you vote by mail in the state of Texas? And my terrible answer to this question is maybe. Unfortunately, the state of Texas did not expand who's eligible for mail-in voting amid the pandemic, despite really robust advocacy efforts. However, there is the United States Postal Service is expecting an increase or a surge in mail-in ballots. And so they're hoping folks are getting those ballots in by October 19th. So again, long story short, even though we haven't necessarily expanded the eligibility to vote by mail, the Postal Service is expecting a lot of people to do it. And so if this is something that might be of interest to you or a loved one or folks in your community, on the right hand of this slide just explains who is eligible to vote by mail, being 65 years or older, being sick or disabled, being out of the county on election day and during the period for early voting by personal appearance, and then if you're confined in jail. There is also an emergency mail-in ballot. And again, this is probably going to be really helpful for anyone who is experiencing COVID symptoms or does have COVID-19. They can request an emergency mail-in ballot. And that information is specifically going to come from your county elections office. And so unfortunately for the state of Texas, there isn't rules around that, but there is more information that your county should be providing to you. If this seems like something that might work for you or might work for a loved one or a community member, the application to apply by mail is right here. And then the Secretary of State also has more information about what voting by mail looks like. Without confusing people too much, there is some fine print in terms of voting by mail and who is eligible for this. And specifically, when we think about voting by mail, there's a question there: does lack of immunity to COVID-19 qualify as a disability during the pandemic? And so while a lack of immunity to COVID alone does not allow a voter to request a ballot based on disability, the Texas Supreme Court did rule it was up to voters to decide if that lack of immunity combined with their medical history allows them to meet the state's eligibility requirements. So again, if you are at risk, think about how you could potentially use this as an opportunity to vote by mail for the 2020 election. And again, I'll share these slides with you just so you do have this information. And more specifically, in terms of what the timeline is looking like around voting by mail, the last day to apply for a ballot by mail is October 23rd. But if you'll remember, the U.S. Postal Service is recommending sending those in by October 19th. And then the deadline for mail-in ballots to be returned to the county is November 3rd, which is Election Day. Again, there is a lot more information on these slides that I'm not necessarily going to kind of talk us through, but it goes a little bit more specifically into what those deadlines are going to look like for voting. And then if you do plan to vote in person, again, early voting did get expanded. It will be from October 13th through October 30th. Where are you allowed to vote early? There should be a number of polling locations in your county. And if you are registered to vote, which you need to be registered to vote to be able to vote, typically your city or your county will have a list of those different polling locations that are open. I'm here in Austin, Texas, in Travis County, and for us, when I go to see where I should vote, it actually shows you wait times as well in terms of what that might look like for voting. Again, just with early voting, I highly encourage everyone who is planning to vote in person to vote early, just because it's going to be less people there and it's going to be a little bit safer for us when we think about the elections coming up, and of course with COVID-19 happening. And then who is eligible to vote early? Anyone who is registered to vote may vote early, but it must be done. But again, if they are registered to vote, then you can vote early. Avis shares that Jefferson County can vote at any location, which is great. That is the same for Travis County, and I hope for a majority of counties in Texas, but do make sure that when you are going to vote, when you're making your plan to vote, that you are checking where those polling locations are. And then specifically about on Election Day, which is November 3rd, sometimes the question is, are our early voting locations the same as our Election Day locations? Sometimes they're not. So if you do plan to vote on Election Day, again, just double check to make sure that your location is open. And also, if your county does provide information about kind of what wait times look like, take that into consideration too. Again, this is me stepping on my soapbox. If you are able to vote early, I highly encourage you to take advantage of that time between October 13th and October 30th to vote in the 2020 election, just to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe, but we're also keeping our community members safe as well. In terms of what you should bring to voting, one, wear your face mask, please wear your face mask if you are going to be voting in person. The Secretary of State's office does provide more information specifically about what a checklist might look like if you are going to be voting in person. There is going to be curbside voting if you're exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms and you're an eligible voter. So again, there's a link right here. You have to check in with your county to see if this is an option for you and what that might look like. It's not a statewide rule, it's more county specific, but there will be curbside voting. So if this is something that, again, that you might want to look into or just be aware of during this time, know that it does exist in addition to the emergency ballot, mail-in voting, and of course voting in person as well. And if you're just curious about more information about how to be safe at the polls, there's more information linked at the bottom. The other thing is make sure that you're bringing your ID. You need to have something that is issued by the Texas Department of Public Safety, or a passport, a U.S. citizenship certificate with a photo, a U.S. military ID. I know for me personally, I always bring my driver's license to vote, but I also know a lot of folks don't have the driver's license. So there's a list in terms of what you can use to bring to vote. If you don't have an ID, technically, you can still cast a vote by swearing that you have a reasonable impediment for obtaining a proper photo ID. However, you're still going to have to present one of the following types of identification. So again, here is a list of different types of verification. I know when my grandmother was still alive, she did not have a driver's license. She did not have a physical a ID. At the time, we didn't need a photo ID for her, but this would be something that we would look into to make sure that she could have voted in this election. So make sure that you're bringing an ID to vote. In addition to that, this is more of another one of my soapbox moments, but I encourage you to bring a list to vote and encourage bringing community members to bring a list to vote. And what do I mean by that? There is a lot on the ballot this year, and it's just not the presidential election. We have statewide races, district level races, and local elections happening during this 2020 election cycle. And so let's make sure that when we are going to the ballot that we are informed in terms of what we're voting on. Again, giving a shout out to the Texas Tribune. They have this is actually an image from their website to where you can just type in their address or your address and show what's going to be on your ballot this year. I did that this morning just to kind of see if it worked, and it worked really well for me, and it gave really great information in terms of what my ballot's going to look like at my new address. In addition, another one of my favorites is the League of Women Voters. They put out an amazing election guide and voter guide for folks. So if you are just kind of curious what's on your ballot this year, getting a little bit more information, two really great resources. Another thing I want to share is that, again, we're just not voting for president. We're also voting on other extremely important positions and also issues in our area. And I want to remind folks that this year there is not straight ticket voting. So you can't just click like straight Republican or straight Democrat. You have to actually go line by line in terms of the different elections that are happening and that are on your ballot. So with that, especially when we think about some of our larger urban spaces, those ballots are going to be extremely long. So we want to make sure, again, that when folks are going into these polls, that they understand that they just can't click and make it a little bit easier. So with that, it is important to make sure that we're educated on what's going to be on our ballot, what are those issues, how can we make the best informed decisions for ourselves. And again, once you figure those out, I highly recommend you physically writing those out on a piece of paper. And the reason I say write it on a piece of paper is because you can't take your phone with you when you're voting. I've definitely tried that before, and I've been told by the wonderful poll workers that you are not allowed to have your phone out at the booth. So my beautiful list that I wrote in my notes section on my phone, I couldn't utilize because I couldn't have my phone out. So learn from me, write down who you're voting for on a piece of paper just so you have that. you can take it to your booth with you. Ava, great point. You can definitely also take a sample ballot with you. I know a lot of times when I'm standing in line to vote, the wonderful poll workers are walking around with sample ballots that you can take and kind of read through, especially if lines are looking a little bit longer. That's another great opportunity for folks to fill that out as well. Thanks for that. And again, if you are curious to learn a little bit more about what's on your ballot, I highly encourage you to check out the League of Women Voters and the Texas Tribune as well. And I know that probably locally, there's some other really great resources in your community that you can turn to be educated and informed on your ballot, because I know I have some research to do myself. And again, I just wanted to put these dates before you one more time. I think this is really the end of my voter education piece, but the last day to register to vote is October 5th. So let's make sure that we're getting registered. Let's make sure our friends and family are registered. If folks are planning on requesting that mail-in ballot, again, that last day is October 23rd. The United States Postal Service shares the deadline is October 19th to make sure it's going through the system. Early voting starts on October 13th and runs through the 30th. So I'm sure everyone on this call who is an eligible voter will be with me during that time voting early. And then election day is November 3rd. And I pulled this graphic this morning. And so the dates where it says 14 days left, 43 days left, that's actually from today. So it kind of puts into perspective kind of what this timeline is going to be looking like for us moving forward. With that, I am going to pause again, and then let's see, any questions? Okay, now we are going to be switching into get out the count and get out the vote efforts, and I'm going to pass it off to Jamie to walk us through how we can combine these during this time.
Alrighty, thanks, Katie. So next slide, please. And as you're finalizing your get out the count efforts in terms of events, social media posts, or virtual events, I urge everyone to take advantage of the audience that you do have and build on that momentum to get out the voting efforts. And so that can look like in terms of your safe in-person events. If you're doing a caravan, you can also host a drive-through voting registration or pass out voter registration packets. Or if you're doing any social media posts, you can also tie in messaging there. And then in virtual events, plugging in get out the voting messaging, because once again, you have that audience, you're a trusted census messenger. And so now you're slowly going to become a trusted voting messenger. And so next slide, please. And we know that the census is an act of civic engagement, and so is voting. And we've been pushing civic engagement for the past year now. And now we can tie that message and really just create a civic checklist for everyone, because it's been a hectic time, and just ensuring that people get it done and know what tangible things that they need to do. And so the first one is, of course, be counted in the 2020 census by September 30th. And then you can also promote register to vote by October 5th, and then early voting October 13th through the 30th, or election day November 3rd. And so pushing these and tying all of these three components together is just a great way to get out the count and also get out the voting efforts, and then encouraging people, your friends and family, to do it as well. And one way that you can do this is by using your own social media platform and just saying that you checked off all of these things off your list. And this can encourage other people to do so. And then, of course, make a plan to be counted, and make a voting plan as well. So everything that Katie mentioned in terms of creating a list for the ballot is just a great way to ensure that you don't miss anything throughout this time of civic engagement. Next slide, please. And tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day. So this is a great way to tie in voter registration efforts with get out the count efforts tomorrow. And so if you're leading any special event tomorrow, you can just do a little small plug of voter registration, or if you're leading an in-person event, if you can pass out voter registration packets or voter registration cards, feel free to do so. And just like Census Day, we know that there tends to be an uptick of people who participate. And so we just want to make sure that we have messaging there out in the community. Next slide, please. And here, I've just included a few ways to create this kind of messaging and combine it with census messaging. So once again, make yourself seen, heard, and counted does not end at the 2020 census. Continue your civic engagement by registering to vote and voting in the November elections. And so this is just through 4 examples of how you can combine your efforts and take advantage of the audience that you do have and just continue to build on the momentum that we have right now. And next slide, please. And then this is just another 2 sets of points. And feel free to, once we send out this presentation, to copy and send these out in your social media platforms.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamie. And as we've kind of said with Get Out the Count effort since the beginning, if you are, oops, what did I do? Sorry, y'all, I advanced. I was getting too excited. I guess I'll just leave it on this slide since it has important dates. But with our Get Out the Count efforts, so we've always said if whatever you're doing during this time, if you can just sprinkle in the census messaging, we're just asking you to sprinkle in some voting messaging as well. And so I know that there are still caravans happening. I know that there are barbecues happening down south where folks are getting their free barbecue and being counted on the 2020 census. So if there is a way for you to partner with folks in your area, like maybe it is the League of Women Voters in your area, to come out and register folks to vote or sharing voter registration forms, a little bit goes a really long way. So again, whatever you can do to help promote voting during this time and combining that with your Get Out the Count efforts would be greatly appreciated. And we would love for you to do that. I do want to pause because we do have a couple of questions. Dr. Edwards asks, she's registered to vote in one county. Can she be deputized to register others to vote in another county? I'm going to try to answer this from my own personal experience. So I am deputized in Travis County to register voters to vote, but I cannot register voters in like Williamson County or a surrounding Austin, or excuse me, like a counties surrounding Travis County. And so I don't believe that if you are not registered in sorry if I'm confusing. I think you have to be registered in a county to be able to register other voters in that.
Katie, your screen just froze. And to finish up, so hey everybody, this is Robin, and I'll talk for just a second until Katie's back with us. I'm a registered voter in Harris County. I'm also a deputy, volunteer deputy voter registrar in Harris County. And what we were told is that you can get registered in another county, but you have to go through the training again for that county. So for example, Fort Bend County is next to Harris County. I could go attend volunteer deputy voter registrar training in Fort Bend and get approved and certified to do that there.
And Natalie, I just wanted to echo the same thing. I'm a VDR here in Travis County, and during my training, and a lot of people that I know are double deputized either in Williamson County or in Bexar County. So it's not just in the county that you're registered to vote. You have to go through the training process, but you can become a VDR in another county essentially. And I'm going to put in the chat box, I'll put the contact information for the voter registration coordinator here in Travis County if someone wants to shoot him an email to ask about that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
And I think Katie is having trouble with her Wi-Fi, so I'm going to try and close out for us. Let me just share my screen. Now my Wi-Fi is being slow. Alrighty. And the last portion was essentially just a few resources that we wanted to share that would just really allow us to just empower people to continue voting and also just gain more knowledge about it. And so NALEO Educational Fund is a great resource, and it also features the 2020 Latino Election Handbook. I actually forgot how many Latinos are in the electorate, but it's a great resource to also look. And then for Spanish speakers that are eligible to vote, they also have a hotline for people who English is not their first language and have questions regarding the census. There's a hotline that they can call if they have any questions, and there also is an English hotline that does the same thing. And then we have Move Texas, which I forgot where they're based from, but it's a great it is a great organization to look for resources in terms of voting. And so I encourage everyone to hop on their website to just learn more. And they also have a great way where you can verify if you're registered to vote. And if you're not, of course, they're going to help you ensure that you're registered. And so you can find this on their website. And Texas League of Women Voters is another great resource here. I believe they're based in Austin, but they also are going to be releasing a voter's guide in the coming soon. And that's it for the presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to stay on for a little bit, but essentially, thank you so much everyone for being here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much everyone for being here. Let me go ahead and end this slide.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much for finishing up our town hall today. And I'm so grateful for everybody here. You're just doing amazing work, and I get inspired after every interaction to see what everyone's doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And actually, we're going to stay on for a few more minutes because it is a town hall. So we do want to open up a space for anyone who wants to talk about their Get Out the Count efforts, or if they have any questions about Get Out the Vote efforts, we're going to stay on for a little bit longer to have that conversation. And Jay Edwards, we are hosting a few census and voter registration tables. Do you have access to any voter stickers / info packets? And so we don't have access to those, but we can possibly reach out to NALEO because I know that they have census packets, and maybe they will have voter packets. And so I can hand that off to Genesis and email her. And we're going to share out the presentation today, and you'll find the graphics there.
Also, this is Jamie's colleague, Robin. Also, on our website, texascounts.com, or you could type in texascounts.org if you like. They both go to the same place. We've got links to our toolkit, and our toolkit has all kinds of graphics, new ones and favorites from earlier this year. And so, you know, please feel free, and I'm going to just type it.
Hey folks, I believe that Jamie and Robin have wrapped everyone up, but just want to say my sincere apologies for being kicked off of Zoom, and big thank you to Jamie for wrapping up the presentation for us. We will have the slides and recording available very, very soon, but I think right now Jamie's saving some time and space for if anyone does have any additional comments or questions, now is the time. And yes, next week we'll be back again on Monday with Lila and Genesis for our Texas Counts weekly update. Our our kind of official last one during the census season. But of course, at any time, feel free to reach out to me, to Jamie, to Lila Genesis, or our info@texascounts.org email as well. But thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and apologies again for the technical issues.
Thanks, Katie. And I believe we have no more questions, and so I'm going to go ahead and close it out. And thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.